There we go. Yeah, my interest in making comes from my practice as a product designer, and I think I'm probably happiest and most excited when I'm in a place like this, a workshop or a factory, or there's nowhere better in terms of the potential of making things and sort of going and seeing how it's made. And these photographs are taken in Italy, in Veneto, where I lived and worked for a long time, at a place called Fabrica. It's a design research centre, so the kind of projects we made there were very much, furniture and objects, but they had a kind of critical perspective. Part of our job was to kind of make things that had a certain amount of inquiry and a certain amount of critical thought. Some products that I made there are such as these, made out of glass and ceramic and metal, and I also made things that you wouldn't even kind of describe as products at all, but they were very much crafted and sort of informed by material research. As well as making a lot of products that are of course made, I've started making projects that talk about making and illustrate something about making. So this is my most recent thing that I finished, and it's for a porcelain company in France. And the objects that I designed for them were almost showing the ingredients of the ceramic making process. It was sort of revealing something of how it is made and celebrating how it was made and the qualities of how it was made. And I made 14 different versions of this. The project that I want to talk about today is the 7 Lamps of Making, and it started in Italy while I was working at Fabrica, and it was kind of an inquiry into the new maker movement and these spaces and what happens there, and the sort of, I was quite excited about the potential of these things. And there's a lot of design theorists that are describing what's happening now as very similar to the arts and crafts movement. And this is kind of like widely discussed by Mario Capro and Sam Jacob, and the pre-industrial atelier is now very much this kind of open source hackerspace. But I suppose because it's a new thing and it's quite a new idea, the results are not quite the same yet. And you have these kind of like time-honored sculptures and all the rest of it, and then you have quite a lot of Yoda heads getting printed at the moment. And this was like quite interesting to me. And Justin McGurk, the design editor, said, open source furniture will not be truly disruptive until it produces its first compelling object. And that really resonated with me. And I think, whether you're like Enzo Mari or the Great British Bake Off, like a certain way of sort of getting to this kind of perfection or the idea of something is basically to have it underpinned by a strong concept. And I thought, okay, that, a bit of, a lot of what you do as a sort of professional designer is to kind of, you grow an object or you grow a project from a strong foundation and a strong idea. And I came across John Ruskin and I thought, the arts and crafts is like full of good ideas and good big theoretical kind of making concepts. And I thought, well, maybe this is a good way to sort of inquire into the comparisons between arts and crafts and the new maker movement. So I aspired to put John Ruskin's theory into practice. He wrote this book called The 7 Lamps of Architecture, and it's actually I've got a copy here. This is a 1902 edition, but it's originally from 1849, and I'll pass it round. So the book basically talks about 7 ways of making things, and he talks about this by referring to them as lamps. And his lamps are very much metaphorical lamps that illustrate big craft ideas. And he uses architecture as a way to kind of describe these ideas. And I kind of wrote a brief for myself where I thought, okay, so instead of it being 1849, instead of it having a kind of religious subtext, instead of it being about architecture and arts and crafts, what if I recontextualize this theory for the maker movement in 2015? So being a product designer, and because of the title of the book, I thought it was quite appropriate to illustrate his metaphorical lamps with real lamps, with lighting products that sort of embody the principles of what he's talking about. So I'm going to try to educate you on Ruskin via these lighting products that I made. His first chapter is called The Lamp of Sacrifice, and it's very difficult to sort of talk about the whole thing, but I'm trying to distill it down into sort of bite-sized chunks, and this is a quote that really resonated, and it's not a question of doing more, but of doing better. And he was very much talking about pushing materials to their limit and like really working a material, like working a lower grade of material better rather than sort of not really doing a good job with a fancy material. And a kind of image that I had in mind about this was origami and paper making, and this idea of something so simple, but if you kind of work it well enough, then it becomes really better because of your effort, basically. So the first lighting product is made out of an A3 piece of paper. It's simply that, and it's folded in a certain way. There's no joins, there's no glue, there's no nothing other than paper and LEDs. And that kind of encapsulated what I thought of as this first principle. The second chapter is about truth, about being truthful to materials and not having sort of embellishments and decorations and this kind of thing. And in the new maker movement context, I thought the most kind of truthful, basic material was something like a circuit board. Pretty much everything from mobile phones to computers are made out of this stuff, but then it's kind of housed inside something else. And if we're thinking about it truthfully, then maybe you don't have to kind of hide it inside a skin, and that material is interesting in itself, and it has value because of its honesty. So I designed a light exclusively made out of copper boards, and it's completely transparent in how it works. The batteries and the cabling and all the LEDs are sort of fully exposed, and because it's copper board, it's kind of joined using bits of solder. The third principle is about power and sort of like creating something that has a mood of power. And this is a really nice quote, I thought, by Ruskin. And he says, "For whatever infinity of fair form there may be in the maze of the forest, there is fairer, as I think, in the surface of the quiet lake." So he's kind of saying that, a lake surface is more kind of assertive and powerful because it's so still and vast. So I designed this light box that tries to illustrate something being sort of calming and powerful. The other thing he said about power was that you shouldn't make something that's aggressive. Power doesn't have to be aggressive. Power can also be sort of calm and enigmatic and mysterious. The opposite of being powerful is to sort of make something beautiful, according to him. And the lamp of beauty is about finding the highest form of beauty in nature. So nature has this kind of almost like effortless kind of intricacy that is very difficult to do with designing something by yourself. And I try to illustrate this with this kind of quite spindly, branchy, slightly poetic light. And it's made from actual branches, and then the joins are made by 3D printing. And I think this principle in particular is really quite aligned with 3D printing, and a lot of what's happening now with 3D printing is like sort of using sort of nature algorithms, and the way that 3D printing works in terms of it growing things is really quite aligned with how nature is formed, I suppose. The fifth principle, the lamp of life, is about handwork, and sort of handwork having a value that is different from machine work. And something is good because it sort of looks and feels like it's been made by a person. So in this case, I ended up doing a sort of hand-whittled torch, and it's clearly sort of made by hand, and in the case that you're holding something, I think it's quite nice that it has this like slightly sort of wibbly wobbly kind of texture, and it's obviously the opposite from something like a Maglite, which is like perfectly machined and made of metal. And but Ruskin had a big thing about sort of quite a sort of human value, where if it's been made by a person, then it's beautiful because you can see that. The lamp of memory, it's quite a big one. It's about making things that hopefully last forever, and aspiring to make things last as long as possible. And I understand that this is his kind of like biggest principle in terms of architecture, and it's what he's most kind of remembered for. And I was thinking about, how do I illustrate this? Do I make it out of concrete? Do I make it out of marble? Do I make it out of something else? And I thought it was maybe a bit more acute to sort of make it out of waste plastic, which is thought about as throwaway, but actually lasts a really, really, really long time. So this one is almost like a kind of trash bag monument. It's like the anatomy of a bin bag. It looks the strangest if you see it outside, but actually it has probably the best lighting quality and the best kind of feel in terms of the mood of the light. And the seventh and last principle is called the lamp of obedience, and this is about not being original just because you want to, and not being kind of self-expressive because of your ego, and doing things, being creative within quite strict rules and quite strict guidelines and quite strict contexts. And to a certain extent, that's what the whole book is about, and this last principle is basically saying, well, do what I've told you in this book already. And so in product design, and when you're designing an object, you very much just think about the limits of that object. But if you're being a bit more obedient and respectful, then you might think about the things that are around it. And I think this is by a really good designer called James Irvine, and it's a good example of respecting context, where there's clearly a relationship between the table and the chair, and maybe you can't actually see it, but there's the kind of thickness of the table is matching to the thickness of the back of the chair, so that whenever you put them next together, there's this kind of harmony between them. And what I ended up designing for this was quite a controlled, kind of regimented, rational lighting product, and the dimensions that I used are actually the A4, A5, A6 and A7 paper sizes, and what he was trying to suggest is that we should respect existing rules and existing contexts, and use those things instead of just inventing stuff for the sake of it. So this was the collection, and you should go and have a look at it outside and ask me questions about it. Why did I choose lamps? When I was doing this project, it did occur to me that it didn't have to be lamps, but it seemed a good invitation considering the title of the book was about lamps. But I think by designing these lighting products, they do embody the optimism of the maker movement. Lighting especially is something that you think of as being made in a factory and being made probably far away. It's not quite the same as furniture, which we're reasonably familiar with, as something that can be made in a workshop kind of around the corner. Lighting is very much an industrial thing, and I think in the last sort of 5-10 years, it's really become possible to make lighting in a sort of craft way, and that's largely to do with LEDs and sort of being able to sort of play around with it safely with low voltages and all the rest of it. I think lamps sort of embody this kind of coming together of form and sort of product design, that coming together with technology and electronics, and it seemed quite appropriate as a sort of genre of things to sort of work with. And lighting is something that is really associated with moods, so you can design a light to sort of embody quite strong metaphors like truth or power or memory or nostalgia or this kind of thing. In the book, Ruskin says, architecture as the beginning of the arts must set the example for other practices to follow. And like this particular wording was like really a good moment when I was reading it, because it really felt like it was almost giving me permission to reinterpret it for a different purpose later. And like, you know, he was kind of explicitly keen on the idea that it wasn't just about architecture. So reflecting on the book and sort of ideas around arts and crafts and the maker movement, I did try to think about, well, you know, what do these things have in common, and what is also different about them, and what is possibly better and has more potential now. So the left-hand column is, I think, what they share. So this idea that designing and making aren't separate, they're sort of unified and together. It's very much about self-production, doing it yourself, and it's very much decentralized. Customization is encouraged, the idea of doing something very specific and very niche. They're bigger things they're not just a kind of design trend or a design phase, they are like sort of big kind of social movements that are bigger than the kind of, than something that will sort of come and go quickly. What the maker movement has that's different from arts and crafts, I think and I hope, is that there's the tools and the methods are much more democratic. The threshold of skill required to kind of have permission to be involved in this is like much lower. There's a medium batch potential to how things are made. It's not about kind of just making one thing and that's it. There is scope to create things in sort of maybe not huge numbers, but you know, certainly more than one. The networked collaboration of the maker movement makes it kind of stronger and more resilient, and it's somehow in Ruskin's time it was he was kind of reacting against a growing industry, whereas I think we're almost at the other end of that, where certainly in the UK at least it feels like it's a reaction against a kind of diminishing industry and this kind of need to make things again. Since doing the project, I've done a reasonable amount of outreach with this. So I exhibited this project 2 years ago now here at the Digital Design Weekend, and I've run workshops in universities, and quite recently in Austria actually I did another workshop, primarily making hand-whittled torches, and then sort of through making these torches I tried to talk a little bit about this theory. And there's a website called www.sivenlamps.info, and there's diagrams and instructions and methods of how to make these things. Thanks for listening.